Hello, I'm Sean Strawbridge, Chief Executive Officer of the Port of Corpus Christi. As the leading energy port in the nation, the Port of Corpus Christi is vital to our nation's economy and our national security. Over 1 million workers' livelihoods are dependent upon our ability to remain open for business. As we combat the spread of this global pandemic, our incident management team continues to work in close collaboration with our partners, including the U.S. Coast Guard, Customs and Border Protection, and the Nueces County Department of Public Health. We continue to support our healthcare professionals and first responders through the distribution of meals, and most recently, in partnership with HEB, we coordinated the distribution of over 1,000 gallons of hand sanitizer to first responders and area hospitals. Whether in calm seas or troubled waters, we are united, and together we are port strong.
New Star is a midstream logistics company. Our relationship with Port of Corpus Christi goes back decades. It actually goes back even before the formation of New Star, back when we were part of Valero. We handle millions of barrels of crude per month that come out of the Permian Basin. And without the Port of Corpus Christi, we would be unable to do that. The pandemic's impact on the energy industry, it's obviously dampened demand. Demand for refined products declined probably 40%. The port's commitment to remaining open has been critically important to us. I know the port has certain security procedures that not only protect their employees, but it protects our employees. Knowing that the port shares that commitment to safety makes them a valued partner for us.
The Port of Corpus Christi has made it a priority to stay open for business because our customers depend on us. They have essential goods and services that they provide to Americans and our trading partners around the world. Whether in good times or trying times, we're going to come out of this better together.
Port of Corpus Christi is an important stakeholder for Buckeye. We have two main hubs. We have the Buckeye, Texas processing facility, and then we also have the South Texas Gateway Project, one of the largest infrastructure projects in the world. Yeah, no doubt the pandemic was not in our 2020 business plan.
We actually endured a double black swan event. What also took shape was a collapse in the oil market. Partnering with the Port of Corpus Christi to maintain our services here in the ship channel was essential. We had vessels that were coming in from designated hotspots. The port was there ready to support us to obtain all the necessary information, maintaining the safety and security of our facility and the port as well.
When you have problems, you got to be a problem solver. And the Port of Corpus Christi is outstanding at that. We're not deterred at all by this pandemic. We've got the right business model, and the Port of Corpus Christi is a big part of it.
Since my election, oil and gas production in the Permian Basin has more than doubled.
President Trump visited Midland on July 29, where he promoted the critical role of American energy jobs in the United States and Texas and expressed the importance of restoring American energy dominance in the Permian Basin.
Under the Trump administration, the United States has increased oil production by 3.1 million barrels per day. That's some number. For the first time in nearly 70 years, we have become a net energy exporter. And the United States is now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas on the face of the earth.
Trump announced 4 pipeline permits granting approval to vital pipeline and railway infrastructure along the U.S.-Mexico border, as well as an extension for liquefied natural gas export authorizations through 2050. All actions that will advance critical infrastructure projects such as the Port of Corpus Christi's Channel Improvement Project, a historic and near fully funded federal project that will make it the deepest port in the U.S. Gulf. And with more than 3 million barrels per day flowing toward its docks through new pipelines, the Port of Corpus Christi is the key to cementing America's global energy dominance.
It's great to be back on your show, and it's great to see you again. Thank you for allowing us to share what's going on at the Port of Corpus Christi. I thought that your listeners, rather than me talk about what we've done thus far with COVID-19, those videos certainly were instrumental in us communicating the fact that the port has remained open for business. But unlike like most other businesses that have been impacted by the novel coronavirus. And as you saw from Khalid Muslih from Buckeye Partners, the double swan event that we saw with the demand destruction in the energy space and the Port of Corpus Christi being the largest energy export port in the United States, we were not without impact as well. Beginning in April of this year, we did see some declines in our volumes, both with crude oil and with finished product, as we call the transportation fuels. We have about 1 million barrels a day of placard refining capacity here for transportation fuels, motor gasoline, jet fuel, diesel. And with the global shelter-in-place protocols that most countries had employed back at that time, we saw unprecedented demand destruction. The world consumes about 100 million barrels a day, or it had in 2019 on average, and we saw about a 30 million barrel a day demand destruction in just a few short weeks as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So we obviously were not unaffected by that. But what we did see is we saw some resiliency. And if we can go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some of that resiliency. So just talking about our tonnage, because as a port authority, we really focus a lot on tonnage, how much cargo is moving through our port. And we're an omniport, meaning we handle both imports and exports, and we handle a multitude of commodities, primarily in the energy space, but we also do agriculture products. We do renewable and wind energy products. We do military cargo. So when we talk about tonnage, we're focusing in on two particular areas that were impacted by the novel coronavirus in the energy space, that being crude oil and the petroleum products. And what we saw is, as you can see over our last 4 years since the repeal on the export ban of U.S. produced crude oil, and we could talk a little bit about what that was, but that happened in December of 2015, and that's really been our growth story over the last 4 years. And you can see that by these charts here. The chart on the top there are crude oil tonnage by quarter. You can see continuing to leg up. Most of that was because of the new pipelines that we saw coming online from the oil production fields and the gas production fields coming to Corpus Christi. Billions of dollars of infrastructure that have been put in place by private companies that then give us the heightened degree of certainty of how much volume is going to come our way, and therefore allows us to continue to build facilities here at the port to export those molecules to our allies and trading partners around the world. We started to see, we came off of record highs from earlier this year as a result of the novel coronavirus, but we're at what I would call higher lows and higher highs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The prognosticators, the analysts, believe that we will not get back on track of that 100 million barrel a day global consumption until sometime in 2022. So we're continuing to watch that. That certainly has had an impact on shale producers, which are here in the United States, are primarily in the Permian production field, the Eagle Ford production field, certainly in the Bakken and some of the other production fields around the country. But the Permian Basin being the largest, about 40% of all U.S. production is in the Permian Basin, and the Port of Corpus Christi being the largest deep water port to the largest production field makes us a natural gateway, a natural tributary for those molecules to reach our allies and trading partners around the world. Next slide, please. Some of the highlights in terms of just, again, our tonnage this year, we came off of a record high in the first quarter, but still well ahead of where we were last year, which was also a record year for the Port of Corpus Christi. But we are a government agency, and our capital is public funds, and we place our capital right alongside our customers in infrastructure, large infrastructure projects. Our customers primarily building pipelines and storage facilities, the port building marine terminals and dredging the ship channel, which is really the main artery, the main arterial for the larger vessels to come in and safely load their products. And we want two-way traffic. That's why we've got this epic deepening and widening of the Corpus Christi ship channel improvement project, which has been unaffected. That project has not been affected by this pandemic and the economic downturn. That is a project that we believe will endure for the ages. And it's about a $600 million investment by both the federal taxpayer and the Port of Corpus Christi. But we also, the cadence of how we place our capital mirrors our customers. So when our customers, which are in most cases some of the large midstream energy companies, or the producing companies, or the marketing companies, which are the large commodities trading houses, when they ratchet back their capital deployment, we do the exact same. They're the smart guys and gals in the room, and we're just going to mirror what they do. So we have cut back our capital program for 2020. We had a $250 million capital budget in 2020. We've taken about half of that off of the table, most of that in deferrals to outer years in anticipation of the economic recovery. Some were cancellations altogether, but most of it has been deferrals. But our EBITDA has held up surprisingly strong. We have also employed some cost containment measures from an OPEX standpoint, and we're on track to reduce our operating expenses by about 10% this year, which certainly has a direct impact on our earnings. Next slide, please. So on this slide, again, this is crude oil. And again, I want to talk about that inflection point that we saw. For your viewers, you don't have to really look at too much other than the first bar on this chart, January of 2016, and the last bar on this chart, July of 2020. What happened, the significance of January of 2016 is that was the first full month that we could export American-produced crude oil in 40 years. President Ford had signed a ban on the exportation of U.S.-produced crude oil in 1975 in the wake of the Arab oil embargo of the United States, and it was a protectionist measure that was in place for 40 years. Under the Obama administration's bipartisan omnibus agreement with the Republican Party, the Democratic Party got production tax credits on wind and solar renewables extended, and the Republican Party got the repeal of the ban on U.S. produced crude oil. The result of that is the dark green line, as you see, that's all incremental growth for the Port of Corpus Christi. That's all U.S. produced crude oil that has been exported to our allies and trading partners through the Port of Corpus Christi since that ban was repealed. That is all incremental value for our economy. That reduces our trade deficit. That certainly increases our allies' dependency on American energy as opposed to other foreign sources of energy, some nefarious sources like Venezuela or Iran or perhaps Russia and Saudi Arabia. So at the end of the day, you know, the fact that we're able to increase that energy resiliency, or as President Trump said in that video, our energy dominance, has really had not only a positive impact on our economy, but certainly on our foreign policy as well. And we believe that that will remain for the ages, as we are the largest producer of energy in the world and now a net exporter of energy, U.S. energy production, which we have not been in 70 years. I think now is probably a good time, next slide, for perhaps us to take some questions, Stu.
As soon as they unmute me, okay. Sean, thank you very much for those questions. It is fantastic seeing you again. We just really appreciate the support of the Port of Corpus Christi with Intercom. And there's a couple things. I love the Buckeye CEO when he says, Sean, that you are a problem solver. Being a problem solver for something that is a strategic importance for the United States security. Could you tell us a little bit about how important you are for the military and shipping out of the gear around the world for the military?
Well, Texas has been a long supporter of the American warfighter. We've got some great military installations in Texas, including right here in Corpus Christi. We've got the Corpus Christi Naval Air Station, which is a training center for naval aviators. And the admiral over all of naval air training, they call that Sinatra, the chief of naval air training. That billet is right here in Corpus Christi. We also have the Corpus Christi Army Depot, which is the largest helicopter repair facility in the world for all the armed forces. They've been here and employ about 4,000 workers in repairing military helicopters. So we've been the Port of Corpus Christi has been a strategic military load center since the late 80s. And this year we will likely become the largest military load port. There are two in Texas, Beaumont and Corpus Christi. And we will surpass Beaumont as the largest military outload center in Texas. That's a position that we take seriously and great pride in, are truly grateful for the relationship that we have with the Department of Defense. But, you know, really they're one of many customers. And what we really focus on is creating customer value. And we do that by talking a lot with our customers. And as you saw from Mr. Smith, Clark Smith, the chairman and CEO of Buckeye, by learning what our customers' needs are and listening to our customers and being obsessively focused, as I like to say, on creating customer value, that allows us to then earn the business and ultimately the support of our customers, which then has been good for our business. But unlike private industry, we don't have shareholders. Our shareholders are the business community, the environmental community, the workforce development and the education community here, and then the community at large. So the money that the port earns from the services that we provide our customers or the facilities that we build and lease to our customers stays right here in South Texas. And that's great for everybody here in the South Texas Coastal Bend. You know, the old adage, rising tide floats all boats. The Port of Corpus Christi has certainly enjoyed a rising tide, and we're grateful for that. And we're certainly happy to give back to all those constituents in the community.
You know, Sean, having that, even though you're a government agency, you have more of a business model with your community, and having ESG as one of the most forward things that everybody is paying attention. Can you tell us a little bit about how the port is being involved with the ESG story and some of the things that you're being asked from your local businesses on the ESG front?
Yeah, certainly ESG has been a major focus for us long before the term ESG was even in vogue. You know, I, as the CEO, my responsibilities are not unlike any CEO of any organization. And that's really organizational alignment and culture. That's capital placement. And then that's really focusing on performance, or what I like to call execution. And those are the three areas that I spend the preponderance of my time. When we look at capital placement, there are really four buckets that we spend our money in, and they all have an ESG component to them. First and foremost is job creation and economic development. Are the things that we're doing creating more jobs and more economic vibrancy for this community? The second is environmental sustainability and stewardship. You can't have the great growth that we've had unbridled without some sort of focus on the impacts and making sure that we are mitigating whatever impacts that may come from these investments. And so we are very large in environmental sustainability and stewardship programs, and that includes air quality, water quality, soils and sediments quality, habitat preservation and restoration, and just overall sustainability. 100% of the port's power buy is renewable. Texas is the largest generator of wind energy, and the port takes full advantage of that. It costs us a little more, but we recognize that with the availability of renewable energy here in Texas, that falls right into our commitment, our ESG commitment. The third area is education and workforce development. We've got to develop tomorrow's leaders today. We've got to invest in our youth, and that's in whether that's their professional educations or going into one of the trades, all of which are important in this area and throughout the country. And then the fourth is just good corporate social responsibility. And the pandemic has hurt not-for-profits. Nonprofits and charities in this country are being hurt significantly because of the pandemic and the economic downturn. We recognize that, and that's why we have spent more this year than we have in past years in supporting our regional not-for-profits who really do create a lot of value in our community, and making sure that nobody is left behind as we talk about this great energy renaissance that Texas is experiencing, and the Port of Corpus Christi has certainly been a beneficiary of.
You know, Sean, some of the big strengths with the port are the highways coming in and the trains coming in, the ability to haul product in with the pipelines. Do you see the ability to bring in other products and bring in to be able to increase other products going out to make up for the loss in the oil business that you're getting? Or reduction?
Yeah, Stu, we've seen this year an increase in our agriculture exports, primarily to China. If you recall, right before the pandemic, the United States and China had reached an agreement on certain segments, certain commodity segments, and agriculture was one of those. We do have a large farming community here in South Texas, and so we have seen more exports of sorghum and other agriculture products. So that's been a bright spot for us, particularly in our rail movements and our dry bulk exports. But what we're certainly seeing is, the relationship with China and the United States is at a low for modern times. I've been in the business 30 years, and this is certainly a low during my professional career. And as a result of that, what we expect is there may be more what we're calling reshoring, bringing some of those manufacturing operations back to the continent. And I say the continent because the United States, Canada, and Mexico have the USMCA, or NAFTA 2.0, that was ratified by all three countries and actually went into effect just a few short weeks ago. And as a result of the pandemic and perhaps some of the shifting trade patterns, we expect to see more reshoring of manufacturing. Now, we've got some of the base building blocks in manufacturing that we've been sending to China in the form of resins and polymers, some of the base building blocks in manufacturing. We've got a large polymer manufacturing plant going up here, a joint venture between the Saudis, Saudi Arabia Basic Industries Corporation, and ExxonMobil Chemical, that will produce a fair amount of polyethylene and monoethylene glycol. Those are some of the base building blocks for manufacturing. So when we talk about what's our future growth opportunity, we think that the manufacturing sectors for northern Mexico, certainly southern Texas, and some other parts of the region, because of the abundance of energy that we've been blessed with, is really going to grow and burgeon, and there'll be more American jobs and certainly jobs across the border, with Mexico being the largest trading partner with the United States. And I think the three countries are probably more culturally aligned than we are with China. So we're pretty excited about where we think the direction of this country is going, but we've got to make sure that we've got good policies to support that. And, right now, again, going back to your question about ESG, is an election year, and one of the most prolific constituents is the 30-year-old voter, and whether they're Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or Socialist, climate change is either 1, 2, or 3 on their list of top priorities. So we've got to make sure that we are communicating effectively and informing and ultimately educating that constituency about the importance of the oil and gas industry to our economy, our national security, and overall quality of life.
Sean, we're getting some fantastic comments about your presentation. Great job from the crowd. One of the questions is, how is the port a competitor with the Sabine Pass and the Houston Ship Channel? I thought that was interesting.
Sure. So, we, when it comes to policy and it comes to, overall supporting Texas and Texas infrastructure, we are all aligned, whether it's the Sabine Neches Waterway, whether it's the ports, the other deep draft ports in the state of Houston, Port Arthur, Beaumont, Freeport, or Brownsville, or the Port of Corpus Christi. We all work together to ensure that Texas has the proper infrastructure in place. The reason why I don't believe that we actually compete is because we have pipelines that are the primary modality to move energy production to the coast. And those pipelines are binary. They're not fungible. Containers are fungible. Containerization is a big modality for the goods movement. About 80% of all goods moves on vessels, and a good portion of that is in containers. We are not a container port. Sabine Neches is not a container port. Port of Houston is certainly a container port. And while containers are fungible, meaning you can reroute a container from one port, you can reroute a vessel or a truck or a rail, you can't reroute pipelines. So once those pipelines are in the ground, they're binary. So we know we're going to get those molecules that are coming our way. Houston's going to get their molecules. They're going to get their containers. And Sabine Neches is going to get their molecules. So there's enough, we think, to support all of that infrastructure, which is why we work very closely in tandem with my colleagues at those other ports to ensure that policy at the state level and the federal level certainly supports the great state of Texas, where, by the way, 20%, a full 20% of all exports from the United States comes from Texas and Texas ports. That's why it's so important that we all have the necessary infrastructure to continue to reduce that burgeoning trade deficit, increase exports, and create more American jobs.
I believe that you have an impact of lots of employees, that you impact 3,000 employees or more that are impacted by this. But I've got another great question coming in. And can you talk about the additional crude export capability coming out of the Corpus Christi port in the coming years? And the second part of this, Sean, is what are the challenges for those new opportunities?
Well, I'm going to take the second part of that question first. And I think the challenges are going to be in attracting investment capital. The midstream space and the upstream space, the mid-scale producers, and certainly the service providers had a fair amount of debt already when the pandemic hit. And the oil and gas industry is being, in my opinion, unfairly vilified. Part of that is because of the election year, and we've heard about the Green New Deal. And it's my opinion that there are facets of the Green New Deal that are certainly interesting. But when you look at it overall, it's really about getting people elected more than it is about, I think, reducing the impacts of the carbon footprints that we see. I certainly believe that there is a correlation between carbon concentrations and climate change, and I think it is irrefutable that we are experiencing climate change. But at the end of the day, it's going to be about attracting investment capital. And if we can't attract the necessary investment capital, then the American energy sector is going to be hamstrung. And I think it's being unfairly vilified, much like and I don't think it was unfairly vilified, but big tobacco was vilified, and rightly so, back in the 90s. But I think oil and gas is now being similarly vilified, but unfairly so. So I think the second part to that question is attracting necessary capital when we see the recovery coming. When we talk about the crude export capacity that we have today, we are very well positioned to continue to grow our exports with the infrastructure that we have in place today. Buckeye South Texas Partners just came online with their new facility there, which is nearly $1 billion investment for them. So that's some additional capacity. We've got some other expansions with Moda Midstream and New Star and others here. And we have some additional planned capacity increases. But the challenge is going to be getting more pipelines to Corpus Christi. Right now, those pipelines need to come from Cushing, Oklahoma, so we can handle the other North American crude slates like Canadian crude and Bakken crude. We do not have access to those crude slates today. So to take full advantage of the infrastructure that we have here, we're going to need to see a pipeline coming from Cushing or coming from the Houston market where there is some congestion. And certainly there's an opportunity for those pipeline investments to be made. But in this environment that we're in today, those investments are going to be challenged. And I'm going to note the Red Oak pipeline, which is a joint venture between Phillips 66 and Plains All American. That pipeline has been deferred. It has not yet been canceled. We're hopeful that it will just be a deferral. And that was really driving the continued investments that we foresaw in crude exports. If that pipeline does not come to fruition, we will likely see more capital deferrals on crude export capacity here in Corpus Christi.
We've got another question for you, Sean. Would you expect any export policies if we have a different administration come in November?
It's a great question. I get asked this question quite frequently. The short answer is I do not expect a change in export policy for crude oil for the very simple fact that if it is a change in the administration, that would be then a Biden administration. If you recall, it was the Obama administration that actually signed the repeal on the export ban. So I strongly suspect that the Biden administration would continue to support that repeal. Do we expect, though, that there will be more focus on renewables and the fossil fuel industry will continue to be challenged? I think absolutely so, which is why we've really got to focus on a policy of all of the above. We cannot have 100% renewables. It's impossible with the current state of the infrastructure in this country to have 100% renewables run this country. The grid will not accept it. We don't have enough land mass to place all the solar and the wind that would be needed to generate that. So we really have to have an all of the above policy, and that includes oil and gas and fossil fuels, which are in everything. Fossil fuels, what a lot of people don't realize, they're in medicines, they're in your smartphones, they're in bicycles, they're in clothing and backpacks and all the above. And so what we've really got to focus on is a policy that recognizes that we've got to reduce our carbon footprint. And again, I do believe that there is a correlation between climate change and carbon concentrations. So let's focus on reducing those carbon concentrations. And one area of particular is let's get rid of coal-fired power generation and convert all of that to natural gas. That will have the biggest single impact on reducing global carbon emissions. And I think if we can take a position of that, this country has already reduced its emissions since 1980 by 40%. 40%. We've done that through the evolution of technologies and investments. And a lot of those investments were made by oil and gas companies.
You know, Sean, thank you very much for your time. And more importantly, thank you for the leadership for the Port of Corpus Christi. It is such a very strategic, important part of the United States infrastructure. And I cannot wait till our next interview. I've still got a lot of things to visit with you, and compliments to your staff. You've got a heck of a crew down there at the port. And again, thank you for your participation in this conference. Thank you,
Stu,
Sean.
it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.